Hello everyone, bringing you a video today for the 55th anniversary of Operation Hump. Now, this was a search and destroy operation conducted during the Vietnam War, obviously in 1965. A classic search and destroy operation, if there is such a thing, in that US and Australian troops were deployed into an area known to be a VC Viet Cong stronghold with the intention of bringing them to battle and destroying them. The troops involved were men of the 173rd Airborne Brigade, the US 173rd Airborne Brigade, and the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment, which had been attached to the brigade on its deployment to Vietnam earlier in 1965. The operation was launched roughly 17 miles north of Bien Hoa in War Zone D, and a caveat here, my apology for any mispronunciation of Vietnamese place names. I will do my best, but I'm afraid that's probably inevitable as the video progresses. As already said, US and Australian forces were involved, and for both it would become something of an infamous battle. The 173rd suffered heavy casualties, and the Australians involved had to leave 2 men on the battlefield missing, presumed dead. The resources were not available at the time to recover the bodies, so somewhat infamous from that point of view. I had hoped in this video to compare Australian kit and US kit from the time period with 2 recreations. Unfortunately, due to various things which are going on at the moment regarding a world health scare, some bits and pieces for the US recreation haven't arrived yet. So this is going to be a 2-part video, with the first part today looking at a recreation of a private in the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment, and there will be a follow-up, a part 2, looking at a recreation of a private of the 173rd, one of the infantry battalions of the 173rd. So that will be coming up in the future. In this video, as I say, we'll be looking at the Australian recreation, and we'll get into looking at that now. So as already said, Operation Hump was a joint US-Australian operation, and the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment was deployed to the south of the Dong Nai River during the operation, and the Australian part of the operation would become known as the Battle of Gang Toi. A small caveat on the kit we're going to look at here in this recreation: the load carrying equipment is M1956. At the time, this would primarily have been that procured through a contract let in 1961 for US manufactured equipment, but marked specifically for Australian use with a D, broad arrow D, on the various pieces of equipment in place of US. I don't have any of this, so I'm using US marked components for this recreation, but they are of the correct pattern for this set of equipment. Looking at the recreation here, we can see that the uniform and the equipment is a mix of Australian and US produced or designed equipment, and there's a little bit of British stuff thrown in there as well, as we'll get into as we look at this in more detail. The weapon carried is the standard Australian rifle at this time, the L1A1 self-loading rifle, though of course Australian troops would make use of other weapons in Vietnam, including the M16. Looking at the uniform in more detail, we'll start at the top as always and move down. The headdress consists of a British-made jungle hat in this instance, with the crown stoved in fairly typical style of the time. The basic uniform consists of shirt and trousers, referred to as greens in Australian parlance, essentially a jungle green uniform. The design of the shirt basically dating back to the Korean War, and the trousers being of a crossover belt design based on the British 1950 pattern jungle green trousers. As already said, the web equipment or load carrying equipment is M1956, and we can see the small arms ammunition cases at the front here. As the soldier is armed with an L1A1 self-loading rifle, these are adequate to carry ammunition, but it is important to note even at this early stage the equipment was often being augmented with extra pouches, particularly by men armed with weapons with magazines which couldn't be accommodated in these pouches, notably the Owen gun, for example. As you can see, these pouches are of the first pattern with the eyelet in the quick release tab. The right hand pouch has the compass first aid pouch attached to the right hand side, and you can see this is of the second pattern with binding around the edge. And the loops intended to help secure grenades to the side of the pouch have been used to carry a nylon toggle rope, a very common bit of kit seen carried by Australian troops at this time. You can also see here that the belt is of the vertical weave type. On the right hip we can see an M1910 canteen in the M1956 canteen cover. The M1910 canteens were also purchased as part of the M1956 equipment when Australia contracted for it in the early 1960s. On the left hip, by way of contrast, we have a British 1944 pattern water bottle in its carrier, a carryover from Australian involvement with British forces in the Far East at this time. There was still some access to British stocks of equipment and so forth, and that is illustrated here by the inclusion of this, and a second pattern water bottle with the rubber cap, as you can see here. In contrast to the US equipment to the rear, we can see the M1956 field pack, and not referred to as a butt pack in Australian service, but rather as a bum pack. And as can be clearly seen here, the suspenders are of the first pattern without the snap hooks to the rear. Moving down further, we can see that the footwear consists of black leather ankle boots, and these are worn with blackened 3-buckle gaiters, which are of a design introduced towards the end of the Second World War. This was essentially standard footwear for Australian forces in Vietnam at this time, although some use was also made of the British canvas and rubber jungle boot, and these would both be replaced in the not too distant future by the GP boot, essentially a high leg black leather combat boot, a much more modern design. So there we are, that was a recreation of a private of the 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment in November of 1965. An interesting mix of US designed, US manufactured equipment, Australian uniform, and some British items thrown in there as well. As already said, that's a recreation of a private of 1st Battalion of the Royal Australian Regiment during Operation Hump. There will be a part 2 to this, so keep an eye out for that going forward, looking at a private of the 173rd. And the idea is obviously the 2 videos together. Originally in one video there would have been a comparison between the kit and the uniform and so forth. The 2 videos will now have to do that in 2 separate parts. So if you'd be interested to see that and you haven't already subscribed, please do consider subscribing to the channel. And whether you're newly subscribing or you've already subscribed, please do make sure you hit the little bell, the little notification button down below. That will of course alert you when I upload future videos. If you really like my videos and you'd like to support the channel, you can. There's both Patreon and PayPal linked down below, and a massive thank you to everybody who supports the channel using those methods. It's very much appreciated, as I always say. If you'd like to keep up with the channel on social media, you can. There's Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, all linked down below. The photographs used in this video, some of them will be uploaded over there if you'd like to have a look in more detail. And if you want to contact me but you don't really use social media, there is of course an email address down below as well. But that's everything for this video, so until next time, bye for now.